only who we are, they also unite us, shape our identity, drive our economy, and inspires pride and innovation. Indeed, when we invest in Canadian creativity, in our cultural industries, in sharing our stories in the digital age, in showcasing our natural heritage, or in promoting and respecting inclusion and diversity, we are investing in a strong, united, and resilient Canadian identity. We are investing in a strong Canada. To achieve these priority objectives, our government has quickly taken action in several areas of activity, including culture. The digital age is profoundly transforming our society, and in the cultural, media, and information sectors in particular, technology is evolving at an incredible pace. At the Mondiacult conference, which will be held in Barcelona in a few days, we'll have the opportunity to discuss how emerging technologies are transforming and can support the cultural sector. Indeed, this evolution brings challenges, but also immense opportunities, both domestically and internationally. In Canada, we've chosen a balanced approach that fosters innovation while protecting the rights of artists and rights holders. We underscored this last June in the G7 Leaders' Declaration on Artificial Intelligence for Prosperity. Par ailleurs, la mise en œuvre de nos lois historiques, que sont la loi...
The implementation of historic legislation, Online News Act and the Online Streaming Act, continues, as does our commitment to fight disinformation and to strengthen local news.
Unbiased and timely life-saving information is essential. That's why we are committed to supporting strong, independent newsroom across the country, with the strengthening of CBC Radio-Canada as a key priority. Now more than ever, we must remain firm in supporting our own creators and promoting Canadian content. We promised Canadians a strong public broadcaster and better access to local news, and that is what we're focusing on. Nous poursuivons aussi activement la mise en œuvre de la loi visant les...
We continue the implementation of the Act for Substantive Equality of Canada's official languages and moving forward quickly and in developing its statutes. This is historic legislation. It's very important to contribute to protect and promote the wealth of our language heritage. Our two official languages are not just a cultural source of wealth. They are also a major economic opportunity, opening doors to international trade and facilitating relations between our provinces and territories. As we defend French and our culture, we invest in the prosperity of our communities. I would also like to say that it's important to have the One Canada Pass, Strengthen Canada Pass. It's a summer initiative of our new government which made concrete a key commitment of our campaign, helping families choose Canada this summer and discover or rediscover the natural and cultural wealth that are the strength of our country while supporting local economies across our territory. Its popularity and our emblematic locations' popularity have shown the unity and the pride that exist in this country. Parks Canada, one of the main guardians of our natural treasures, is the example of this pride.
Identity, uniting Canadians through powerful stories and iconic landscapes, fostering a deep sense of pride. They connect us not only to Canada's history and environment, but also to one another, reinforcing the values and experiences that define us as Canadians. With decades of experience working with partners, Parks Canada supports Indigenous self-determination, cultural continuity, and socio-economic well-being. Indigenous-led programs expose millions of visitors to the culture, wisdom, and practices of diverse Indigenous communities. With more than 200 sites, I'm almost done, Madam Chair. With more than 200 sites across every province and territory, in urban, rural, and northern communities, Parks Canada plays a vital role in supporting local prosperity. These treasured places are powerful economic engines that drive tourism, create jobs, and strengthen communities' well-being. With 24 million visitors helping generate $4 billion in GDP annually and spending the equivalent of more than $11 million every day in communities across the country. Nous avons le plus beau pays du monde. Et nous avons raison
we have the most beautiful country in the world, and we have every reason to be proud of it. Our riches are assets to protect and to enhance, to build our country and to build the world in which we wish to live. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to take your questions.
First to Mrs. Thomas for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Minister Travis Danraj was employed by the CBC as a news broadcaster, and this summer he launched a human rights complaint against the CBC, alleging that they had created what he calls a toxic work environment. He says that he faced discrimination, bullying, and harassment as a person of color. In an email that he sent out announcing his new podcast, he stated, and I'll quote, "To be honest, this has been the hardest period of my life. What happened at CBC really broke me," end quote. Minister, according to the Government of Canada's own website, the CBC is a Crown corporation that operates at an arm's length from government, but it is ultimately accountable to Parliament through the responsible minister, which in this case would be you. Have you reached out to the CEO of the CBC regarding this situation and the toxic work environment that is being accused there?
Merci pour la question. Donc, comme vous l'avez...
Thank you for the question. As you said, first of all, I deplore what happened to this employee of CBC. As a government, we expect that all government-related organizations create a healthy work environment for everyone. The government role is not to get mixed into the daily operations and management of the organization. That is in the purview of the organization, in this case, the public broadcaster, who also has a board of directors. Our role is to ensure that the public broadcaster plays its role and represents the values and Canadian culture.
To get into the nitty-gritty day-to-day, but this is not the first employee that's come forward with concerns. There's been numerous of concerns brought forward with regards to the toxic culture that exists at the CBC. Ultimately, you are responsible for having appointed the CEO, and she does answer to you as the minister. You have the ability to move her out should that be needed. Have you had a conversation with the CEO with regards to the toxic culture that exists there?
Comme vous le savez probablement, la
As you
nouvelle...
may know, the new CEO has been on the job since, 6 months? So since last December. I have had the pleasure of meeting her once since I have come to this job, and I imagine since she's been on the job. And as I've repeated, our expectations as a government are, whether it be CBC Radio-Canada or any other Crown corporation or department, everything must be done.
I'm going to take that as a no. And I think that's
Non, vous
incredibly
m'avez demandé si
shameful
je
that
l'ai
as a minister
rencontrée, je
you
l'ai
wouldn't take
rencontrée,
enough
madame.
interest in the well-being.
You asked me if I met her, and I said I did.
To pick up the phone and just have a conversation with the CEO and figure out what the heck's going on there. I share my time with my colleague Carrie Diot.
Mr. Minister, I heard you say that you believe in the principles of diversity and inclusion, correct?
Oui, c'est exact.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
One of the core stated responsibilities of your Heritage Ministry Department is diversity and inclusion. And yet, Travis Donraj said he was used as a token of diversity. And in his own blunt words, and I will repeat his blunt words, the CBC didn't get the brown guy that they thought they were going to get, end quote. He said he discovered this when he tried to be inclusive of conservative news views on a show, Conservative Views. So what steps have you personally taken to address these systemic issues?
Je pense qu'il faut faire très attention en tant que parlementaire.
I think you have to be careful about not taking one event or several isolated events and then generalizing from there. If you look at what's being done at the public broadcaster on radio, on TV, in recent years, there have been considerable efforts made for diversity and inclusion. Is it perfect? No. I don't think anybody is perfect in this area. I think there have been significant improvements, and this is certainly going to be part of the conversations which I will be having with the new CEO of CBC to know how we can continue to improve, how can the public broadcaster continue to improve in this matter.
Quote, workplace defined by retaliation, exclusion, and psychological harm. So that workplace, the CBC, received nearly $1.4 billion in taxpayers' funds from your department last year. So as the minister responsible for the CBC, are you concerned that your department is funding a workplace that has been described in this way?
Encore une fois, je suis vraiment désolé pour l'expérience de travail que cette personne a.
Again, I am truly sorry about the work experience this individual had, but I refuse to generalize to the entire public broadcaster about these. I know several people that work there and people who are there as a result of diversity who have personally told me several times how the work climate there is very positive. It's possible that for that individual that things did not go well at all, and I'm very sorry about that. As I said, I think it's always possible to do better, and we'll be working with the public broadcaster so that we can do better.
Canadian Heritage has planned to spend $281 million on diversity and inclusion in the coming year. So will any of this money go towards ensuring there is a diversity and equity in the opinions broadcast on CBC?
Je pense que faut faire très attention. Au Canada, on a un
I think
diffuseur.
you have to be very careful. In Canada, we have a public broadcaster, but it's not a government broadcaster. Our government doesn't tell the CBC what to say and what not to say. That's done in authoritarian countries. But in a democracy, whether it's here or in France or in Germany, EBC in Australia, the government does not intervene in programming and in broadcasting. We ensure that the public broadcaster is properly managed and is managing public funding, and we are responsible to Parliament. It's absolutely out of the question to have the government become involved in the daily activities.
6 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Minister. Ethnic media outlets play a crucial role in ensuring that Canada's diverse communities see themselves reflected in our media landscape. In Port Moody, Coquitlam, we've heard from groups like the Canadian Ethnic Media Producers Association and local outlets such as Parvaz Media and KTV Media about the need for sustainable funding. What steps is the government taking to support ethnic media organizations so that they can continue serving their communities and contribute to Canada's cultural fabric?
Merci beaucoup pour la question. I think there's a number of things that the government is doing to try and foster this particular Canadian ethnic media producers across the country. So we have the Changing Narratives Fund, what we call the CNF, which is a $10 million investment over 3 years to support diverse voices in Canadian media, support diverse communities, Indigenous, Black, racialized, ethno-religious minorities, people with disabilities. We also have the Canadian Media Fund that supports diverse communities in television, digital media, screen industry, and cinematic production industries. In fact, the CNF is a stream of the CMF, so the Changing Narratives Fund is under the Canadian Media Fund. Prioritize projects that foster the development of an inclusion audiovisual sector. We also have the Local Journalism Initiative that supports diverse communities in written press, community radio, community television, and online news services. It's delivered by a non-for-profit organization to protect the independence of the press, so the government doesn't decide who gets money through that. And there's a priority to hiring diverse journalistic representation. And finally, the last example I would give is the collective initiatives component of the Canada Periodical Fund that supports diverse communities in the magazine and newspaper industries.
Merci. Thank you very much. In 2012, in my riding of Port Moody, Coquitlam, Amanda Todd, a young 13-year-old teenager, tragically lost her life after relentless cyberbullying and non-consensual distribution of her private images. Her story is a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of online exploitation. Today, with the rise of AI-generated deepfakes, women and marginalized groups are being disproportionately targeted. What can our government do to ensure stronger protections and supports for those most vulnerable to these evolving forms of online sexual exploitation?
As a father of 3 girls, my heart goes out to Amanda's family, and what happened to her should never happen to anyone. Online safety is certainly about protecting kids, but it's obviously more than that. So we're committing to making a criminal offense to distribute non-consensual sexual deepfakes and increase penalties for the non-consensual distribution of intimate images by strengthening the criminal code. I believe, as we're speaking, in fact, my colleague, Minister Fraser, is in the House of Commons, speaking on his new bill C9. And in terms of platforms, we've made a commitment to combat online harms. I have myself worked on that during my first passage at Heritage between 2019 and 2021, Many of my colleagues have continued on that. We tabled a bill in last Parliament, C63, that was aimed not specifically at online harms, but also modernizing the criminal code. So we will be introducing measures to address hate speech, terrorist content, and the harmful distribution of intimate images.
Yes, thank you. I'll be sharing my time with MP Halsud. Merci.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I'd like to touch on Heritage's economic dimension. Mississauga Centre sees it firsthand. Heritage and culture are not just about identity; they're about jobs, investment, growth. I think of the Mississauga Arts Council, for instance, that plays a key role in providing opportunities for emerging artists. Could you speak to us about the role that heritage and cultural investments play in creating good jobs and strengthening our economy?
Yes, I mean, for obvious reasons, when we think about the heritage sector, arts and culture sector, we tend to think, for very valid reasons, of its intrinsic cultural and artistic values. But we sometimes tend to forget how important of an economic driver it is in Canada. To give you a few numbers, in 2024, creative industries in Canada provided approximately 670,000 jobs in the country that contributed to $65 billion to Canada's gross domestic product, which is, I think, as a sector, it's one of the highest sector in terms of its contribution to GDP. So it's obviously heritage and cultural investment. It's obviously about preserving our past, but it's also a powerful economic driver, but also a powerful unity and identity and community well-being driver. In communities like yours, where diversity and creativity thrive, these investments help create good, sustainable jobs across a wide range of sectors. Canada is actually globally recognized for its high-quality creative content and industries, which are an engine of economic growth advantage. And it used to be that it was Montreal and Toronto, but now we're seeing creative hubs being developed all across the country, from coast to coast to coast, really, where foreign investment are coming to Canada to create jobs in the creative sector, and that's a good thing for all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Champoux pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la
You have
Présidente.
6 minutes. Mr. Champoux, thank you, and thanks to all of you for being here today. Mr. Minister, we have many questions. Are you optimistic about culture in this budget? Are you positive? I think you know me well enough to know that I generally am an optimist. I wouldn't be doing the job I'm doing if not. Well, Mr. Minister, this would be nice if you could communicate your optimism to the organizations you meet with. The cultural industry in Quebec, I can't speak for the rest of Canada, is full of people who are extremely concerned. Festival organizers, broadcasters, creators, everyone is worried because we don't know what's coming and we can't get any answers. People can't get any answers. And people have been asking for a long time in many cases. So I'll ask you some of these questions. For example, you know that the cultural sector, especially festival organizers, have been asking for certain heritage funding to be made permanent. Funds for the arts in particular. These are programs that are periodically improved, but for a long time organizations have been asking for predictability. They want to be able to breathe and not waste time having to constantly apply to obtain the budget increases that are necessary to have these main events and festivals operate. Can you tell us that this is going to be resolved and that they're going to receive the budget on an ongoing basis every year? Thank you for the question, Mr. Champoux. I've met on several occasions several of the same people that you have met with. In your question, you stated that the two heritage funds have been improved occasionally. Those are your words. We did, in fact, improve these funds on several occasions. If we're looking at 2015 to 2024, the budget for arts and culture at the federal government level has doubled. If you look at the Council for the Arts and various heritage departments. I think that governments know and organizations know that our government has been there for them. We have implemented, we've increased budgets, but can I guarantee anything? No, I'm not Minister of Finance. But that's everyone's concern because you put this in your electoral platform. This spring, you talked about increasing the funding for granting organizations such as the Canada Council, the NFB. They need to hear that it's going to be in the budget. It was in your elections platform. Isn't that a promise, a commitment? We will all discover what the budget is going to contain on November the 4th. The commitment is to make the investments in the course of the mandate, not necessarily the first year. Maybe there were things that will be done the first year. But again, people in the sector know, and I think there were people that touched me very much who said that they were glad to see me back at what was called Heritage Canada at the time. I think we have a good relationship with cultural groups, and I understand that they are making the demands that they're making. Well, you know, they've been struggling for so long. Does this mean it's going to be resolved? Well, doubling funding over 10 years, that's not a minor ask. But again, it's fine to increase funding that had been cut by previous government. That's good, but perhaps what they're asking for is to do this on an ongoing basis, on a permanent basis, to not have to keep coming back and lobby and spend all their time doing this rather than being able to actually organize events and production. You talked about newsrooms also. You talked about increasing the budget at CBC Radio-Canada to improve news coverage, especially in the regions. We're all in favor of that, as you know. But CBC and Radio-Canada is not the only newsroom needing help. There are newsrooms all over, particularly in the regions, who need assistance. Radio stations, written stations have a tax credit. But electronic media newsrooms have been asking for the same thing, the same tax credit. It's been discussed. You're familiar with this file. Are you able to say that, yes, this is coming? You're going to be able to breathe a little bit so that these undertakings can cover Quebec and Canada's regions appropriately, not just using the public broadcaster. Well, you're right. The role of the public broadcaster is very important. But we're dealing with an ecosystem here. There are public broadcasters and private broadcasters. We have implemented several measures to be able to assist local media to be able to serve their communities, the tax credit, the Canada Periodicals Fund. But the tax credit for newsrooms, for radio and television, is that also coming? $100 million with Google. We're trying to see what we can do, if there's anything more we can do for the media sector, including private broadcasters. As I was saying earlier, we're going to see what comes in the budget. So in other words, you're not able to say to them that, yes, this is coming. No minister is ever going to be able to say that there's going to be a guaranteed budget. We don't know. Do you have your mandate letter? Yes, it's public. Can you say that in that mandate letter there is anything that you're going to be able to tick off as of this fall? The mandate letter is the same for all ministers. It's public. The team and I myself are working so as to be able to, as you say, tick off as many boxes as possible. But we can't do everything in 1 year. It's not possible. We are undertaking to do this during the course of the government's mandate. Thank you. Your time is up.
Over to you for 5 minutes.
An organization called Cult MTL. It's a self-proclaimed politically left tabloid that exists online, and the Heritage Department deems it as, quote, journalism. They've given them a grant to that effect. It was given in 2024-2025. On September 11th, the day after Charlie Kirk's assassination, this organization released an article titled "To Hell with Charlie Kirk." And the article makes light of his assassination and then ends with these words, "You reap what you sow." Now, I'm an advocate for free speech, so as much as I find these words disgusting, I'll defend their right to say them. However, what I do find indefensible is the fact that Canadian tax dollars were used in order to propagate this type of material. Do you believe that that's wrong as well?
Honnêtement, j'ai vérifié avec la sous-ministre. On n'a pas...
Honestly, I checked with the Deputy Minister. We have not been made aware of this. I can undertake to quickly look into this with the department and see what, in fact, was printed in this newspaper, and we'll come back to you and convey this to all of the members of the committee.
The article here with me, so I could give it to you here today. Would you cut the funding to this organization, or would you continue to support this type of thought that is being put out there?
Sous toute réserve de vérification que le député...
Subject, of course, to any verifications that the department and I myself may do, hate and spreading hate has no place in the public discourse in Canada, and we have legislation to that effect. As I said previously, we are not aware of what was written in this case, but we will make the necessary verifications.
Example of such actions that have been taken, and it's actually Canada's Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia co-founded an organization called the Anti-Hate Network. Now, they've been funded by your department to the tune of almost $1 million. And a portion of this money was used to hire what they're calling, quote, an investigative journalist. And what they're asking this person to do is find stories about what they're calling far-right groups and individuals. And a part of their definition of those that would fall within this group includes Catholics and people who identify as pro-life. Now, this investigative journalist would then go find stories or write stories and then give them to the mainstream media in order to get the narrative out there further. Now, as you can imagine, something like this only serves to divide people. It's a grave disservice to the unity of our country and the well-being of our people, and it spurs further polarization. Now, in the beginning, you stated, and I'll quote, that we need to unite and come together. So when an organization is taking almost $1 million from your government and using it to this end, do you believe that they should continue to be funded?
Comme je l'ai dit, effectivement, notre rôle...
As I've said, our role as a government and as members of parliament is to unite people and not work to divide them. With the department's team, I'll be looking at what was done by this organization. And if, in fact, what you're saying is true, we will take the necessary steps.
Revoke the tax dollars that are going into an organization like this? I mean, Minister, let's be clear. You're collecting tax dollars from people all across the country with all sorts of beliefs, from all sorts of backgrounds. And those dollars are being used towards an organization that's actually furthering or spurring greater polarization and arguably hate in this country by choosing to pick on certain groups of people. Minister, is that type of behavior excusable? Should we continue to use public dollars for that type of conduct?
C'est arrivé dans le passé que nous ayons retiré du financement des organisations.
In the past, we have withdrawn funding from organizations which did not act in keeping with the federal government's values. We will examine this particular case, and if it turns out that the organization does not deserve to continue receiving government funding, the funding will be withdrawn.
To hearing from you, I hope on the record, as to your decisions with regards to both these organizations, called MTL, as well as the Anti-Hate Network. Minister, you did say that you had a welcome meeting with the CEO of the CBC. I'm just curious, to be clear, you did not at all bring up with her the workplace culture at the CBC and the fact that there are significant complaints and numerous complaints with regards to it being toxic in nature. That did not come up in your meeting with the CEO.
I'm sorry, there's no time for that response. You're out of time. Mrs. Thomas, perhaps you can...
because you gave everyone else an additional 20 to 30 seconds.
You had an extra 20 to 30 seconds in the first round, and now we're into the second round, and I'm trying to be more cognizant of everybody's time. So we'll go to Mr. Al-Sood, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you once again, Minister, for being with us today. I know it means a lot to the members of this committee and to the millions of Canadians tuning in on CPAC right now. Minister, we often hear about the challenges facing Canada. We heard polarization just a moment ago, but I think Canadian heritage is uniquely placed to bringing people together. I know that's something that we share as a belief. I see this daily in Mississauga Centre. Can you highlight how the department is using culture, sport, and commemoration programs to strengthen national pride, unity, and reconciliation at a time when Canadians need it most?
Merci, Monsieur Al-Saoud. Je vais me permettre de vous parler
Thank you,
en
Mr. Al-Saoud. I will speak French to you because you speak French very well. You're absolutely right. The department and related organizations can play a very important role in these matters in terms of pride and unity and even reconciliation. Few people know this, but Heritage is responsible for implementing the Indigenous Languages Act. The commissioners and directors, the Indigenous Languages Commissioner reports to Heritage. I was minister at the time, and we had the Act for the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which we will be celebrating tomorrow. But there are several department programs, such as digital citizenship. We are funding projects to help fight disinformation, including in diversified and marginalized communities. But there's also a role played by the National Film Board or Telefilm Canada, or the very important role of national museums and historic sites that are managed by Parks Canada, which contribute to keeping our stories alive or bringing them alive. Thank you, Minister. There are about 2.5 minutes left. I'd like to share my time with my colleague.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question for you. What are the main successes of the Strong Canada Pass, and do you plan to extend it for the coming months or next year? Thank you very much for that question. According to the data, we don't have the final data, so we're still compiling data with our partners. But for Parks Canada, the increase in visits was 10%. For national museums, we saw an average increase of 15%, more specifically, families with young children. For example, the Winnipeg Human Rights Museum said 82% of people who used the pass were coming to the museum for the first time. So it was an important incentive to have people discover the museum. We saw a very clear engagement on the part of young people. 15,000 came to the History Museum, 7,000 came to the War Museum. 19% of the increase in visits to the Museum of Nature were age 0 to 17. Recently, I was with my colleagues from the Departments of Culture in the provinces and territories in Regina. And provinces could participate, and almost all, with one exception, chose to participate. So provincial museums were also eligible for the program, the Canada Strong program. And there was a strong demand to have a similar program next year. So we'll be working with Heritage and Parks Canada on one side, but with a whole series of partners to try to be able to recreate that experience. Mr. Champoux, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Minister, if I can get back to the improved funding for CBC Radio-Canada. You promised to increase their budget by $150 million. Concretely, what are the requirements that you're going to attach to this increase? There are clear suggestions and proposals that were made by your predecessors, some of which were very interesting. What are the conditions that you're going to be attaching to this funding, should this funding occur? Thank you for the question. I'd like to point out that the $150 million, we were very specific in the platform. It was $150 million in the first year of the mandate. Me and the team are working very hard. I'm working very hard to try to make sure this promise comes to fruition. The document that Ms. Saint-Onge presented at the beginning of the year, I think it was in March, was a highly relevant document which is guiding my work on this matter. I only have 2.5 minutes. Are there conditions attached to the funding or not? Mr. Champoux, we are certainly going to be asking for a certain number of things, but you have to be careful because you're talking about a public broadcaster. How far can we go in what we're asking for? I think you could expect to see something about investments on local news across the country. I think this is a recurrent demand, and I think we'll have good news about that fairly soon. I'm going to change topics. The CRTC has been working on implementing C11 for quite some time, another bill that we worked on together during the beginning of our first mandates. But things are taking a long time. The content creators in the country and the cultural creators in the country are asking when this is actually going to lead to something. When are we going to see the money for digital companies who are enriching themselves to the tune of billions of dollars and who are offering absolutely nothing in exchange to allow for media production in Quebec and Canadian producers to be able to get through this very difficult transition period? So how can we give them a bit of hope in a few seconds? Well, the CRTC is an independent organization. We hope that this goes as quickly as possible. We did increase Telefilm Canada's funding by $50 million. That's not insignificant.
And we are next over to Mr. Waugh for 5 minutes.
Mr. Minister, welcome back. You were here in 2019, 2021 when I was here. There's a few of us left on this committee. Thank you to the staff, Ms. Mondu, and the three Andrews that are here today. Mr. Minister, I just want to raise again this workplace culture with CBC that Ms. Thomas, I just want to get it on the record, if you don't mind. When you did meet with the new CEO of CBC, Marie-Philippe Boucher, you did not raise the workplace culture or the toxic atmosphere at CBC, or did you? Yes or no?
Madame Bouchard et moi avons parlé de plusieurs choses.
Madame Bouchard and I spoke about several things, including the importance for the public broadcaster of being aligned with Canadian values, of course, as well as the values being defended by the Canadian government.
You talk at all about the workplace culture that has all of a sudden percolated, if you don't mind me using that word, with the CBC recently?
Je pense que là-dessus, on va devoir s'entendre sur le fait qu'on ne s'entend pas. Moi, je ne partage pas votre opinion.
We have to agree to disagree. I don't agree that you can take a few isolated cases and generalize to the entire public broadcaster when it comes to the whole issue of the atmosphere at work and working conditions for thousands of employees at CBC. We can't take a few isolated examples and say that this is the way it is for everybody. I don't share your point of view. But where I do agree with you,
I mean, it was on every...
Médiatisé, mais ça ne
yes, it's got a lot of media coverage. But that doesn't mean that the situation is generalized across the public broadcaster. That's where I don't agree with you and your colleague. I don't share that point of view.
You share this, Minister, with the CBC. As you all know, the viewership is down, the revenue is down, and in fact, the trust is down. And the former CEO, when we had... Ms. Tate here actually agreed with the trust in CBC is down. The streaming platform subscriptions, we don't know where they are, but now your leader has promised another $150 million to CBC. How is this possible? I'll tell you what it is done in Western Canada. Okay, CKSA Lloydminster has served that community for 60 years. Stingray shut the station down because CBC's there now. And the same with CHAT Medicine Hat. 70 years in that community, television is gone. 70 years in Medicine Hat, gone. So while you say the public broadcaster is this and that, I want you to know the public broadcaster has crept in and has destroyed private media in this country. I gave you two examples here, 60 and 70 years. Your thoughts on that? How is this reasonable?
Nous en avons parlé tout à l'heure avec votre collègue.
We discussed this earlier with your colleague, Mr. Champoux. In Canada, and when I'm talking about traditional media, in Canada, as elsewhere, everywhere else in the world, or almost, is experiencing difficulties with the advent of the online platforms, with advertising budgets that have gone from local television and newspapers to the web giants. I think looking at a global problem and saying that it's Radio-Canada or CBC's fault, well, I just don't agree with that. And I see that people across the country are saying, we want CBC here in our community. I've heard that across the country.
They hide the numbers of GEM. You know, there was an ATIP on CBC this summer asking just, how many subscriptions do you have to GEM? Oh, we can't tell you that because it wouldn't be fair to our competitors. Crave, which is owned by Bell Media, actually has 3.8 million subscribers in this country. And yet, for CBC GEM, we can't share it. There's free subscriptions, and then there's the paid, $5.99 a month, I think. So is that fair when you say, you know, the public broadcaster is hiding when they're asked? We'd like to know how much money is put into GEM. How many viewers? It might be, Minister, that GEM is useless and it should have been torched a long time ago. So when they're covering up, as a former broadcaster, when I see them, oh, we can't tell you, then I know there's red flags with the corporation. I know that for sure. And in Ontario, I'll just tell you, 0.35% of the streaming market in Ontario participated in CBC GEM. That's not even 1% of the province of Ontario. So that tells me little or no participation in this country on GEM, whether it's free or subscription-wise.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh. That's your time, and we'll move over to Mr. Miles for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre, d'être ici avec vous.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being here with us. I have a question. This is something that's been of interest to me. With digital services, artists can access international markets, global markets, but it also presents challenges because to support culture and music in the regions, which is so important to Canadian culture, be it Alberta's country music or Cape Breton's music, Acadian music from where I'm from, New Brunswick, how can the government support music and culture in the regions in this globalized market? I think with your decades of experience as a musician across the country in English and in French, I think you probably know more than all of us about this, Mr. Miles. But to answer your question, there are two things. Well, there are two elements to the answer. First of all, how does our government support local and regional arts industries and musicians and artists, and how does Canada support these in the global market? So Canada's presentation for the Arts Fund helps to support organizations who help present professional artistic series or festivals. We support organizations such as Tohu or the Festival des Transamériques, the Sherbrooke Festival, Vancouver Fringe Festival. There's also the local culture support fund, $150 million through CBC Radio-Canada to strengthen local news and Canadian narratives and to fight disinformation. The second part of the answer is that we support Canadian creators who show our culture not only in the country but across the globe. There's Canada Council for the Arts, Telefilm, National Film Board, the Media Fund. There's also Creative Canada Exports, which is focused on exports. So that's accountable to the department. One is for export ready and the other is export development. So for things that are just starting up and organizations that want to extend their reach to the international markets. It's a very popular program.
Small venues. We talk a lot about, our big theaters, which are beautiful in Canada. Winspear, National Arts Centre, Dalhousie Arts Centre. In fact, I think the member and I were talking about this last week. no one shows up in those venues unless most of them have toured around the country in our small venues, whether it be performance spaces, creative spaces, bars, cafes. I'm wondering if there is a way for us to support the small venues for the next generation of talent, emerging artists that build their skills the same way that we have hockey rinks around the country that help people become professionals. We won't have people at the NAC unless we find ways to support them as emerging artists. I wondered if there was ways the government can support that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there's two things that comes to mind. The first one is the Canada Arts Presentation Fund, and the second one is the Canada Culture Spaces Fund. So the second one is for upgrades, renovation, equipment, and planning, and this is it tends to be for smaller projects all across the country. So we're not talking like big $100 million project, but smaller project in communities. Let me give you a couple of quick examples. $2.8 million invested to the Canada Cultural Spaces Fund in New Brunswick for upgrades to museums and theatres, $750,000 at Highland Arts Theatre in Nova Scotia for accessibility, sound, lighting, live stream equipment, $1 million provided to Ware Edmonton Community Artists Network Society to purchase Hardcourt House, which is an artist-run center which I had the pleasure of visiting. It's not completely finished, but when I was in Edmonton recently. So these are some of the examples of how we're trying to support smaller venues across the country.
That's great. I mean, I think it is really important. I just want to go back to the first question because it was, I know we were talking about export, but I guess I'm wondering about particularly streaming. I know it's a tricky subject, but I think it is one of the things that we're presented with streaming, and that it really gives us access to international markets. But again, I just want to go back to, are there ways that we can support our streaming, not that we can support our streaming services, but in what ways, let's say, does C11 try to adjust, or some of the bills and some of the work that has been done in the past to address, let's say, minority language, minority communities, discoverability, those kind of things?
Unfortunately, there's no time to answer that question, Minister, but I'm not sure if you have a hard stop at 5:30 or if you can give us a couple extra minutes, we can get in a third round.
I can stay a couple of extra minutes.
All right. Next, we have Monsieur Généreux pour 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thanks for being here. There's a rumor that's been going around for the last week and a half saying that 2 former ministers who were going to leave the government and another current minister, who was perhaps waiting to October 19th. The interpreter did not catch the third name, but the other 2, one to New York City and one to the Netherlands. Are you planning to leave after October 19th? I don't know about you, Mr. Généreux, but I like Star Trek. And one of the series, there's a race that's called the Ferengi. And they have a book that's their Bible. And in that book, there are rules. And one of the rules deals specifically with rumors. And it says, hear all, trust nothing. So I'm very happy where I am, and I have every intention of staying here. Very good. I'm happy to hear that. Today, we saw a complaint regarding the Official Languages Act by the FCFA, that the Languages Act is still not fully implemented 28 months after adoption, that not everything has been implemented. Do you have any response to the Fédération des communiqués francophones acadiens du Canada? Yes, I met with them on several occasions. My team meets them monthly. In the next few weeks, we will be publishing at least 2 of the 3 statutes, and there are 2 that are ready to be presented. It's going to happen soon. Mr. Champagne, the finance minister, has asked you for the next 3 years to cut 32.5% of your budgets. Have you decided where you're going to cut? I think it's 15% over 3 years. I think it can be done in different ways. I was talking about the Canada's Media Fund, the Telefilm Canada Fund. These funds were created, these institutions were created. Telefilm was funding films because people were going to cinemas to watch movies. And there was a television fund because people watch TV at home. But now everybody's looking at things on their on their little screens, such as their phones. Do we need these organizations, or should we be pooling them together and then fund films, series, television? The department is considering all of this, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing every now and then to take a step back and look at what we're doing and say, is there a more efficient way of proceeding? But as I said to your colleague, Mr. Champoux, we have made historic investments for minority languages, $4 billion over the 2015 to 2024 mandate. It's still a priority for us, and certainly for the Prime Minister as well. So in 9 years, you doubled the budget, so 100% more for all of these organizations. And now you're expecting to remove 15%, knowing full well that inflation is also a factor. So my question is this. If official languages are important to you, because sometimes we wonder about the Liberal Party, but if official languages are important to you, do you believe it's relevant to cut, especially in minority areas in Canada? Because they're working very hard to maintain the vitality of the French language in these areas of the country. So I don't know how you would be able to justify reducing the budget for these people, because their resilience, I've seen it after 10 years in official languages. I'm happy that we're able to talk about this here, because sincerely, they need to have certainty. They need reliability over time, across time, when it comes to their funding, because they are at risk. They're highly vulnerable, and I want you to promise us today that the next budget will not cut their funding, especially for minority areas in Canada, for the Francophones. Well, let me reassure you, if you look at what we've done in recent years, modernization of the Official Languages Act, recognizing French in Quebec, we invested $4 million to support minority language communities, $750 million per year in francisation in Quebec, year after year. I've told your colleague this, Mr. Champoux, I'm not the finance minister. I can't guarantee what there will or will not be in the budget. What I can tell you is that streamlining, you talked about 15% cutbacks. This is not a wall-to-wall parametric exercise where everybody does the same thing. There is a discussion with the finance minister, with the Treasury Board, to be able to seek efficiencies where possible, so that ultimately I think that we and you agree that what we want is for Canadians to get more for their money. Thank you. Mr. Alsuts, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and hello again, Minister. As you know, I was born in Montreal. I lived there most of my life, so I am fairly familiar with the importance of the cultural and creative industry in Quebec. David mentioned this, but it's true not just here in Canada. It also applies globally. When Canadian stories travel abroad through cinema, literature, or music, they show the world who we are, and they develop our industries here. Can you give us an example of the way in which federal funding has made it possible for Canadian stories to reach new audiences both at home and abroad? Thank you for the question. I referred to this briefly before to Mr. Miles. The creative export strategy is done in collaboration with Global Affairs. So it's Heritage and Global Affairs who work together on this to provide funding, organize missions, and provide advice. I could tell you about 95 export projects which were funded to the tune of $44 million, and that made it possible to reach 25 international markets. I could also tell you that there's a lot of enthusiasm internationally, and I was witness to this when I was at the Toronto International Film Festival a few weeks ago, for Indigenous language and culture. We now have the Office for the Indigenous Screen, which seeks to support Indigenous creators so that we can see their stories on our screens. They're doing exceptional work, and there's a true enthusiasm and appetite for this, not just in Canada, but internationally, for this kind of story, this kind of cultural story.
Square, which has become a true cultural hub. On any given weekend, thousands of people, and I mean it, thousands of people gather to celebrate food, music, traditions from every corner of the world. It was only 2 weeks ago I attended Philippine Festival. It was partially funded by Heritage Canada, and so I was very proud to let them know. Could you speak to us about the different ways Heritage Canada is supporting multicultural, community-driven celebrations and ensuring that they continue to thrive across the country?
Yes, thank you so much. There are a number of different initiatives that we have in place to support these particular festivals. $65 million in federal funding will be infused into the cultural sector this year alone, including $15 million to help festival and art presenters reach audience across the country, but also around the world. The Building Communities Through Arts and Heritage program. Every year, that fund supports 700 events in 435 communities across the country, including events organized by Indigenous, 4 cultural Indigenous celebrations, 2 SLGBTQI+ events. The major festival initiatives, it's $23 million over 3 years. That started in 2024-25 for the TIFF to attract leading filmmakers and actors from around the world. $15 million for the Shaw Festival Theatre in Niagara-on-the-Lake in Ontario. The list goes on, but I think you see that we are very involved. This is something that's very important for communities across the country, communities like yours in Mississauga Centre.
I've got 1 more minute. Fantastic. Minister, could you speak to us a little more about, and I know Ms. Royer asked the question earlier on local media, and obviously we all know within broader context that it's a topic that's brought up to us as members of Parliament fairly frequently. Could you reiterate the importance of local media and ethnic media within our individual communities in terms of getting maybe some of the more community-related achievements out, some of the more community-related things out there?
Yes, the Initiative for Local Journalism has certainly been a very popular program. I hear about it all across the country whenever I meet people in communities across the country. And one of the things we are doing is, are there things that we could do or improve? Are there other things we can do? I mean, we know that the media sector is going through a rough time, and obviously we want to support our public broadcaster, but also private broadcasters play an important role in our communities as well. We have initiatives for them as well, but are there other things we could do? Is certainly one thing that's very front and center in our conversations in preparation for the budget, but also in terms of what we can do as a department.
Thank you. Mr. Champoux, vous avez 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Champoux, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, is English in danger in Quebec?
C'est une question piège, Monsieur.
Is this a trick question? Well, I still need an honest answer from you. The answer to your question is no. Obviously, English language communities are in a minority situation in Quebec because there are more Francophones. But does this justify English language groups justifying from support that should be reserved for official languages, minority official languages who need to be protected and enhanced? Do you think that it's to be expected that so much money should be spent on protecting English in Quebec rather than supporting, as Mr. Jenner said, organizations such as the FCFA, who are concerned about the application of the new Official Languages Act and the funding that they're worried will melt away like snow in the sun? I don't share your point of view about funding. I've said it and I'll repeat it. We made historic investments for minority language communities in the country. And I think that there is a question of equity. The English language community is a minority community in Quebec. Well, I have very much respect for them, but they're not. You said that English is not in danger. There are issues for this community, as there are issues that are not the same for French language communities outside Quebec. In 1 minute, Mr. Minister, I'd like to bring you back to the cultural sector because the issues are of great concern to me. This week in this committee, we passed a motion to study the impact of artificial intelligence on the cultural sector. I'm convinced that you are very much aware of all of these impacts and of the danger of artificial intelligence for our cultural industries. What do you and your government intend to do? Are you going to be legislating in the very short term on the subject? This is a question of great interest to me. My last book before I entered politics was on the whole question of artificial intelligence. There are clearly worrisome aspects of artificial intelligence. And as we've heard from creatives as well, is that there are opportunities as well. What we want to do as a government is optimize the benefits of AI for the population and for creators, as well as minimize the downsides. These are discussions that we're having with my colleagues, Minister responsible, Minister Joly as well, and the Minister of Heritage. We're all working together to see how we can do this, to find this balance. Thank you. Thank you for the little extra few seconds to have us receive a very important answer to such an important question. Thank you. Minister, thank you very much.
Quick to respond to this committee's invitation and for giving us all of the time that you had available. We really appreciate your time. We're going to suspend for about 5 minutes so we can switch over, give you a chance to leave the room, and then we have the rest of our time with some of your officials to answer further questions. Thank you. intelligence study. We've asked members to submit witnesses by the end of today. However, many members did not give us complete information for the witnesses. I know lots of us are new and the process is a little different, but I'm wondering if everybody is in agreement that we give members until tomorrow morning, since we're sitting late tonight, till tomorrow morning to submit the final list of witnesses for the AI study. Or is everybody okay with that? We have until tomorrow morning for our witness list for the AI study? It's okay? And secondly, the clerk has let me know that we have no CRTC confirmation yet for our meeting on October 1st. So we are still waiting to hear back to see whether the chair of the CRTC will be available next week. Mr. Champoux.
On avait prévu que ça pouvait arriver, Madame la Présidente.
We had planned for that possibility. And if it were not possible for the head of the CRTC to be here on the 1st, we had said that we could study the artificial intelligence study. Is that not enough time to have guests for that? Well, I received the names, and there's also a holiday on Tuesday, so that takes another day. It might be tight. Madam Chair, I propose that either we discuss this now or that we reserve 5 minutes at the end of this meeting to discuss this committee business. What we are going to plan for and until which day we should keep the Wednesday meeting open for the study on artificial intelligence if Madame Etienne is not available. So let's take 5 minutes at the end of today's session so we can resolve that. Okay. Okay.
I have Mr. Waugh first for the Conservatives for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I've seen 7 officials ever. I've been on. Yes. Yeah, I've been on this committee for 10 years. I don't think I've seen 7 officials from the department in front of me, but that's enough. Does anyone know the GEM numbers?
We don't. And
have you
it
asked?
Would be a good question for the CEO. I think you have called her before this committee. Maybe that's a good question for her when she appears.
Yeah. Does the Heritage Department think it's important to know?
Madam Chair, it's hard for me to pronounce because it's under the Access to Information Act and they have applied the legislation, so it will be myself second-guessing the application of another act by another organization. So I think asking her directly would be the best course.
So we hear of a possible 15% reduction. I say possible because I've been around the House for 10 plus years now, and they say one thing and do another, but 15%. So if you looked at your budgets, and Ms. Mondu, in fact, and you were just in Regina, and you know my interest in the RCMP Museum, and the department has 2030 kind of said, we'll give you 12 million over the 4 years. Is that still on the table?
So I had the pleasure in Regina to meet the chair of the board, and she's coming the week of October 6th, I think, and we'll meet again. There was in the FES 2024 some money for the museum for not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year. So we have a bit money from the FES 2024 that is for the museum. But obviously this is something that the budget decision are not made by the department, they're made by the Minister of Finance.
Yeah, I think you can appreciate the angst, if you, okay? I mean, they have done their budgets. They want to be a national museum. We have so many here in the Ottawa region, and maybe in Halifax, Winnipeg, and now the RCMP Museum in Regina, but they would like to know if the fall economic budget from last year, which said, I'll give you in the next 4 years, $3 million each. So what would you say if they're watching now and they're coming in October, they've had discussions around the table, and they want to know if that funding is there or not?
thank you for the question. I will say the same thing that I say to the chair. They have done amazing job. You are absolutely right. They have done amazing job over the last couple of years to really bring new consultation, deep work in bringing that solid foundation for the museum. But I will say also that ultimately those decisions are not mine. They will be the Minister of Finance, and therefore that's only I can hope for it, but I cannot tell you for sure.
So what was, I think, linked as a great possibility of 12 million to 2030, you're saying it isn't guaranteed anymore, right? Is that what I'm listening to you?
What I will say is we had a change of government between the FES 2024 and this government. It's a different government, so they have to obviously decide if they are still comfortable with the decision of the previous government.
Same government.
Yeah,
just a
but
different
it's still,
leader.
in law, it's still a different government.
That's disheartening, though, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah.
Because when it was promised, then the wheels get pushed in motion, and they're a little angst. I did meet with them. You were in the city. And they should be on their tippy toes, if you don't mind me saying right now, because there doesn't appear to be any commitment, even though the public safety minister wants 1,000 more RCMP officers 7 steps away from the museum. You're not really committing any money now to the museum that I see, the 12 million. Is that true?
So the organization also met with the minister and discussed exactly what you have raised. So they have here, the minister have heard them.
The Canada Strong Pass, it was talked about a little bit by the minister when he was here, because pretty good program. You provided free or discounted admission to national parks, to our museums this summer, historic sites, even some train travel. Is the government subsidizing the lost revenue for these groups that I've just mentioned?
So the PASS program was basically cost neutral for the organization that participate, and they are going to be indemnified for the cost of offering those services for free.
So if I go to a national park where I usually pay, and now I didn't pay because it was free, how are they going to even their budgets out, if you don't mind me asking?
My colleague would be happy to pick that one.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you very much. And the way that we will be, we did keep track of those that have come into national parks and national historic sites, those that came in for free, and we will be compensated for the value of those individuals coming into national parks and national historic sites over the 2-month period of the Canada Strong
Number
Pass.
B.
So right now we're at about 10 to 11% increase over our previous year, 24-25. So we will be looking at once we get our final numbers, we'll present them to the Treasury Board, and we expect to be remunerated for that lost revenue.
Could you give our answers, if you don't mind, your answers? Could you provide them in writing to the committee? We would like, because we probably won't see as many of you here, but we would like to know the numbers over the 2 months, the dollar value, and, you know, are you going to compensate? And we'd like
Thank you,
to know
Mr.
those
Waugh. You're out
numbers.
of time, but I will leave the analysts with that request.
Good.
Okay. And next we have Mr. Al-Soud for 6 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. Indeed, 7 officials is interesting and impressive. So this committee is about to launch a study on artificial intelligence. Its impact on creative industries is something that we're going to be studying and considering above all else. As we begin this work, I'd like to hear your perspectives on how we can seize the opportunities of AI while protecting our artists and cultural workers. Has the department commissioned or gathered estimates on the economic impact of AI on heritage and on Canada's cultural industries? I'd be very curious to hear from you on that.
Thank you. I will start by saying that we have been gathering people and discussing this issue for a couple of months, if not year now. There was a consultation with the cultural sector that we conduct with our colleague at the Department of Industry, just to understand better exactly what you say. What's the impact? What people are fearing? What are the opportunity? So that consultation took place. There was also a survey online. And just last week, I had the pleasure to chair two roundtables with the union, all the union of the cultural sector from English Canada and all the union from Quebec, and they talked to us about what they think is important, what needs to be done from a regulatory point of view, but also from a training, international, etc. So we're gathering very, very good information on that. In addition, we signed an MOU with MILA, which is the institute in Montreal. You know them. And we have also conducted some roundtable there to understand better. And 3 weeks ago, I think I was in TIFF and also participate at a roundtable with the sector. And the question we're asking are very specific, and we're saying, what practically can we do to help?
That's fantastic. Thank you for that very comprehensive answer. Je l'ai mentionné plus tôt, je suis né à Montréal. J'ai vécu pour...
I mentioned earlier that I was born in Montreal, and I spent most of my life in my youth, well, I am still young, but there. But I did see the immediate impact of local media on culture in Montreal. Now, this is not the case everywhere in the country. Local media is not always as strong everywhere else in the country as it is in Montreal. And we're talking about rural regions in Quebec as well. What can we do to avoid news deserts in regions such as Mississauga, my city?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So, alors, il y a vraiment un programme qui a été...
There is a program specifically designed for that. It's for local journalism. The idea of the program was to fund journalists, in other words, pay the salaries of journalists in areas which are either complete deserts or almost deserts when we talk about news deserts. And so this was in 2019, and it's working very well. And it makes it possible to hire journalists in small communities. Sometimes these are newspapers with just one or two journalists, and they can really develop capacity. In some cases, they decided to share the resource to be able to help each other out. So this is one example of a measure that helped. C18, Bill C18, it was an agreement with Google, who invested $100 million. And that means that journalists who satisfy the criteria can have up to $13,000 per journalist for their journalists. So some local newspapers have benefited from this.
Journalism initiative, and how many of those serve ethnic or multilingual communities?
It's 700, mais je vais me tourner à ma collègue si elle veut ajouter quelque chose.
I'll turn to my colleague if she'd like to add anything. In the last year, there were 404 final recipients for press organizations or 700 newspaper journalist positions.
Separate note, different note, more serious note. Our country is grappling with rising anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. Could you speak to the programs the Department of Canadian Heritage has to support community-based initiatives addressing this trend? And would you be able to share how many funded projects are currently underway?
Great. Thank you very much for the question. I think it is really accurate the way that you've sort of characterized the situation across the country in terms of some sorts of division that we're seeing, and we're really trying to tackle challenges that are facing communities through a number of different programs. I think first and foremost are really the programs that are under the multiculturalism and anti-racism banner. And so we've had a number of calls in the last year and been able to fund community organizations across the country in terms of programming that is aimed to bring people together and to combat hate, to tackle anti-racism. And we've also had a separate program that we launched earlier this year, which is the National Holocaust Remembrance Program, particularly targeted at anti-Semitism. And in that regard, we've been working with and providing funding to a number of Jewish organizations. To do so, we actually worked with the Special Envoy on combating, on Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism to identify Jewish organizations across the country that would have the capacity to carry out these projects.
Fantastic. Madam Chair, how much time do I have left? 30 seconds. Brilliant. Then a very quick one. The Minister highlighted that we've seen incredible rates of journalistic representation as it pertains to diversity across our country. Would you say that diversity within that element of diversity across the country from a cultural standpoint leads to differentiation in terms of perspective from a journalistic standpoint?
I think that's why we create the narrative fund, because there was a feeling that there was not enough representation in the media, in cinema, and etc. And that's exactly the goal of that program, is to see more different voice and having people getting the chance to be on whether it's a newspaper or a media, and therefore make the story even richer.
Thank you. Monsieur Champoux, vous avez 6 minutes.
Merci,
Mr.
Madame.
Champoux, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Like my colleagues, I'm impressed to see 7 department representatives present here. But even more impressive is the number of Andrews that we have at the table today. I think there's a lack of diversity here, but it makes it easier for us. At least we don't get the names confused, at least the names of the men here. Anyhow, thanks for being here and taking the time to answer our questions. I'd like to begin with a question on parks. I think that's Andrew's purview. Free entrance from Parks Canada. Have you measured the impacts that this had on the other tourist organizations in the regions? For example, were there other parks who said that they were charging admission and they lost money because of this? And did you offer any compensation to those tourism undertakings that lost money because of the Canada Strong Pass? When we discussed this with members of the tourist industry, they said that generally it was advantageous. Not everybody, but the great majority of businesses near the parks and historic sites said so. Now, of course, there were some whose product was similar to the Parks Canada product, so they felt that that created a drop. But generally, there was an increase across the board and across the country because Heritage Canada had a program for museums which offered practically the same thing as Parks Canada. But maybe there were rare cases, but in such cases where the cultural or tourism businesses had losses, they weren't expecting to have the federal government compete against them. I think a lot of people took advantage of the free entry, and that was great, but do you have any intention of entertaining claims from the people who lost money because of this competition that it caught them by surprise? Are you open to that? We're always open to have these conversations. We only have the power to change the situation for what takes place in a national park or is in a business relationship with Parks Canada. What's outside, we don't have the means to resolve those problems. Thank you. Getting back to the Google subject that Madame Mondu raised, that $100 million from Google that is being used to support information media. Is it working? When the rules went through the CRTC, how are things going? Have newsrooms been taking advantage of this? Have you heard any positive or negative feedback for next steps in terms of this annual amount to be spent? Thank you, Chair. During the first year, one organization had to be selected to manage the handing out of the funding. And of course, there were issues where people had different interpretations of who was a journalist, for example. There were various issues raised. So in the first months, there was some adjusting, and I think that's to be expected. But now, when you talk to people, they tell us that things are going very well, and this has made it possible to resolve issues that had been unresolved in terms of the practical implementation. So things seem to be going well. Just out of curiosity, while on the topic of the CRTC, in the committee, we thought we would be hearing from Madame Yukaris in the coming weeks. There was a lot of work for the CRTC coming from this committee, with C11, C18, and other issues coming up with broadcasting. I know the CRTC has just been overworked. Is the slow pace of results of the CRTC work affecting the work at Heritage? Are you slow to advance things that could be helpful? In the policy published by the Minister for C11, they asked the CRTC to make a decision within 2 years. It's an organization that's independent, so they can't force them. They won't respect the 2 years, but they are moving much more quickly than they have done in the past. There will be a lot of big chunks accomplished in that time frame. So you could ask the chair, but there are hearings right now. There are decisions that are coming down the pipeline because there were hearings in the spring. So I think that for a quasi-administrative tribunal, I think they're moving, quasi-judicial, I think they're moving much more quickly than usual. So last quick question. This was raised earlier. The finance minister's command to cut expenses by 15%. Have you received that from the minister? Have you been told to cut and to look where to cut? And if so, what about the organizations that count on grants from Heritage? Should they be worried? All departments have been subject to the 15% exercise, with the exception of the RCMP, CBC, and the Canadian Forces, who had a slightly lower proportion. So we all have to go through this process. But there are programs being examined, but also positions within the public service. It's not just dealing with programs, but also on ways we operate and seeking greater efficiency. So it doesn't exclude the programs. Thank you, Mr. Shampoo. That's it.
5 minutes. Awesome. Thank you. I guess my question is this. When it comes to the formation of the budget, obviously the finance minister is the one that completes that process, brings it all together. But I would imagine it's up to each department to put forward requests in terms of how they would like their funding allocated. Am I correct in that?
You are absolutely correct.
Okay, so the Heritage Department then has put forward to the finance minister its priorities and where it would like its allocation of dollars put.
That's correct. We have always to do it within certain instruction. The Minister of Finance gave instruction about what he expects, so we have to respect that. Sometimes they limit the number of the men, or they limit the way we should be doing it. Mm-hmm. But yes, the Minister present his request to the Minister of Finance.
Okay. So are you able to confirm with us then today the status of that request for the RCMP Heritage Centre? Was it requested that that would continue to be funded to the full amount that it currently is?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to do that for one reason. It's a cabinet confidence. The conversation that happened around the budget, it's like a conversation at cabinet. It is a cabinet confidence, so I'm not in a position to reveal what the minister proposed.
Okay, so you're not able to talk about any of the priorities that were set in terms of how money is allocated for this budget?
I can talk about the priority of government, but I cannot attach it to what was requested specifically for the budget exercise.
Okay, thank you. One of the changes that has happened, of course, is the minister's title has changed. Now it includes, Canadian culture. I would imagine then the department should have a definition of that so that they know the end they're working toward or the goal that they're looking to achieve. What is the working definition of Canadian culture in the department?
It's interesting. It's probably, I won't get it perfectly right from memory, but in our departmental report, it defines our mandate, and it includes culture, but it's also include diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. It's also include heritage, official language, and sport. So all of these things are defined in our mandate, and the better definition than what I can do is actually in our departmental report.
But the phrase Canadian culture is defined then for the department?
I mean, it's defined in the term of what's the mandate, what's our mandate to support culture, but it's not a definition like you will find, for example, for the purpose of taxation, where you give some money to some organization because they produce certain kind of content. So it's different from that. It's defined more in terms of mandate, like supporting culture, industry, and things like that.
Can that definition be made public? Can it be shared with this committee?
Yeah, absolutely. The departmental report describe what the department role is in supporting the culture.
Do you mind sending that to us just so that we can take a look at that? Yeah, thank you. And then just with regards to online harms legislation, that was introduced by this government in the last parliament. It came up just a bit earlier. The minister has said that he feels it's important. He has said it's coming. There's a lot of people that I think are anxiously waiting for it. When is it coming? What is the time frame?
That would have been a very good question for the minister because it's more in his bailiwick than in mine. Yeah.
Okay, so the department doesn't know.
The department always stand ready to serve when the government wants to table something, but the decision as to when to table things is the prerogative of the government.
Has the department been asked to work on this at all?
We haven't stopped to think about it because we know that people care about that, and we receive open letter almost every day asking us to do something, whether it's for children or deep fake and all of that. So it's part of our mandate to always work on that and reflect on it. But the final decision as to what it will look like and when it will look like is the prerogative of the minister.
So I guess what I'm curious about is what steps have been taken to start developing a framework for this legislation?
So we had already C63, as you mentioned. So that's already a framework that was based, as you will recall, because you were here, on a lot of consultation and advisory committee and all of that. So we have that. But obviously, the world doesn't stand still, so we continue to look at what other countries. Deepfake was not so much an issue when we start to look at the bill originally. So today, Minister Salomon gave a speech in Montreal, and he said that's one of the issues that the government want to address. So we, as I say, we keep updating it as we go along, if I can say that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Monsieur Nutumba pour 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Tout d'abord,
thank you very much.
First
of all, thank you. We'll have more responses than fewer with so many of you. Back to what my colleague Leah said. Artificial intelligence, rather. How are artists across Canada, especially those from underrepresented minorities, going to be protected against having their cultures erased? That's an excellent question. And it's a question that the minister is going to be discussing at Mondiacult next week. This is a great challenge for all cultures who see themselves being amalgamated with this new emergence of artificial intelligence. At UNESCO, they have directives being considered to strengthen the presence of diverse cultures. It's based on the 2005 convention, which wants to recognize diverse voices. So we're looking with UNESCO to see what can be done international to strengthen that presence with this new AI. But here as well, we're going to be dealing with the same issues and challenges. As I was mentioning, various stakeholders are going to be looking into this, and it's going to help us see what the best way of reacting is. Is it through regulations? Is it through funding? Or is it through some other means? It's probably a combination of several measures. Thank you very much. The other point involves C18. We're talking about local media. So what are the steps the department is taking to support local and ethnic media to prevent regions from becoming a media desert and to fight against spreading of disinformation as traditional media declines and the newsrooms in the regions are closing? Well, I would raise 2 points for your media question. In the local journalism program that I mentioned earlier, this is an independent program. It's not delivered by the government. It's delivered through an association, and one of the associations deals with ethnic media, and they ensure that local newspapers that are ethnic newspapers can participate in the program. In addition, when Bill C-18 was passed with the work of this committee, there were specific criteria that the agreement had to cover not just the major newspapers, but also minority ones, minority language, indigenous. This was what made it so attractive. The money given by Google is therefore going to go to all kinds of media, not just to a major media in the major urban centers. And now I'd like to talk about Parks Canada. What about environmental sustainability and climate change?
OK. Donc, j'ai manqué quelques.
I missed something. Should I repeat? Yes. How does Parks Canada measuring the visitor experience with sustainability, environmental sustainability, and the climate adjustments in national parks? With visitor experience, we have interpreters whose responsibility is to ensure that Canadians who visit national parks or historic sites hear the stories. That's more for the historic sites. But also in terms of climate change and other impacts to the environment, it's really interpreters who communicate with about 25 million Canadians a year in terms of interpretation. Madam Chair? Madam Chair? Do I still have time? 30 seconds. Generally speaking, what do you have to say about the Canada Strong Pass? How did that go? How successful was it? I think what was really noteworthy in the federal provincial meeting is that some museums saw their increase from 40% increased by 40%, and they received clientele that they hadn't ever had before. So perhaps these people might go back to our institutions. I must confess that colleagues across the provinces, because almost all provinces participated, were very surprised, very pleasantly surprised to see these positive results. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Champoux, you have 2.5 minutes. Madame Mondeau, you talked about C63 as basic material, giving you an opportunity to work. And are you considering the studies? C63 hasn't been passed, but there are studies that were made in the committees which have been approved recently, studies done during the previous session. One on the downsides of sexually explicit material online, the harms caused by that. Do you use this? Are you aware of this? We consider the reports and the report of the committee and also private members' bills, because there are 2 private members' bills, one from a senator and one from a Conservative member of Parliament. And we look at this because all parliamentary work is relevant to what we do. I appreciate hearing that, Ms. Montu, because seriously, there are witnesses who came here to the committee and who shared extremely difficult things with us. And I think it's important to have these things considered, even if the study had not yet been officially passed at that time. So I thank you. Now, I'd like to say a few words about sports. Not much has been said about it, but in the sports world, a lot of things have been happening in recent years, and a lot's been said about offering a safe environment for people to be able to grow up playing sports. What progress has been realized since the last time we discussed this and the last time that it made news headlines for the wrong reasons? Could you say a few words about that? Yes. We had a commission to make recommendations on the future of sport. The commission made its interim report about 2 or 3 weeks ago. They consulted a whole series of people in the world of sports to refine their very ambitious recommendations. The Secretary of State for Sports said that the government was going to look at these very closely. And as well, other things have been done. There was a team created to ensure closer follow-up and more in-depth follow-up when there are problems in certain organizations, such as Hockey Canada, soccer, etc. So this team did its follow-up, and together with organizations, it implemented plans often based on the recommendations of an outside expert who had made recommendations regarding the health of the organizations. Previous Minister Qualtrough, also told organizations to have a governance code that's a little bit different, with various provisions that are now required for our funding. And then we have an independent organization looking at complaints of people who are unfortunately victims in the system. And this organization has been transferred to another organization and was relaunched in April with somebody managing the program who actually comes from a trauma-informed background. So it's early days still, because we're talking about April, but it seems to be working. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Champoux. Next, we have Mr. Généreux, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Mondoux, I'd like to clarify something. Analysts always prepare a document for us at the beginning of the session and when we are going to be meeting witnesses, and I'd like to thank them for doing their excellent work. There's a sentence in which I had understood that spending cuts was 7.5% in 2026-27, 10% in 27-28, and then 15% in 28-29, for a total of 32.5%. But the minister earlier said, no, it's 15%. I just want you to confirm for me that it is 15%, not 32%, that the government was saying. Mr. Champagne asked for all departments for the next 3 years. The first year is correct, 7.5%. Second year, 10%. And the third year, 15%. And the 15% is to continue in the future. So 15% cuts will be the new budget for the departments. So we're talking about a total of 15%. The maximum is 15%. It increases the first year, there are less significant cuts. And earlier the minister was saying, talking about efficiency measures, talking about, I think, Telefilm Canada, I can't remember, the media fund. So I imagine that in your budget analyses, you were looking into the potential to restructure or see whether there were redundancies or things that are being tripled to have better efficiency in the spending that you are engaging in your department. Personally, I think it's a great idea because I've asked myself, some organizations in my riding have contacted me since they've heard that I'm on the Heritage Committee. And they're saying, how come the budget that they have received has been cut? Have you already begun to cut? Have you already begun to review programs? Has an analysis begun? Is there something that's been done recently, in recent years, with the money being distributed for festivals and whatnot? Has this process been underway for some time, despite the fact that Mr. Champagne has asked for 15% additionally in spending cuts? Excellent question. Madam Chair, I would say 2 things. First of all, we're always looking at our programs. My colleague was reminding me that to answer Mr. Mao's program, during the pandemic, we subsidized small halls because they were closing down. And then we thought it really helps the sector. So we had a pilot project with Factor distributing money to see whether this could be a more effective way of proceeding. So we're looking at trying to refine things. We looked at things from during the pandemic, after the pandemic. And maybe this partially answers your question. In terms of efficiencies, at the department, we are modernizing our programs to be able to deliver them in a more simple fashion, simpler for the organizations and for us, so that we can be quicker. One of the difficulties our organizations were having is that the application forms were cumbersome. They take time and resources. So we are currently doing this, and we used it for the past. We delivered that program in a very simple fashion, a one-pager. People filled it in, and it was done in a few weeks. So we're trying to experience the client experience so that people aren't spending their whole time filling in forms. You should give Quebec some of your ideas with the SAEQ and SAC-CLIC. Okay, let's say we have a $2 billion budget and you want to have 15% cut over 3 years, so let's say about $300 million less, if my math is correct. Madame Côté, you're the one who does the math, so I hope my calculations were correct. Now, I said 2 billion, maybe it's 1.5 or whatever. I don't remember. I haven't checked the exact figures. You're pretty good. It was 1.9 billion. All right, not so bad, not so bad. So we're talking about potential cutbacks of $300 million. $300 million is inevitable savings that you're going to have to realize. So does that mean that today, Telefilm Canada, who are probably not in this room today, or other organizations relating to cinema, because earlier the minister said, oh, people are now looking at their screens today. They're not going to movie theaters anymore. So does that mean that there are artists or artisans or organizations who should perhaps start sweating more heavily because maybe the consumption of their products is now done differently, and therefore maybe their budget could be cut by the federal government? Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The review of organizations in the audiovisual area that the minister referred to is part of the Yale report. Some of you remember this report. The report was an in-depth consultation exercise that led to the Broadcasting Modernization Act, proposing the reform of CBC and a reform of our audiovisual sector so as to be able to reflect the new reality. Somebody producing a product, regardless what the product is, doesn't even know if it's going to be a film or a series or 6 shows, or is it going to be a movie, and they have to knock on several doors. The Yale report was saying, no more time, sorry, I let you go over a little bit because it was in the answer form. It's a very important answer, but I agree. But next, Ms. Royal, you have 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. So great to see so many of you here. Partnership with Indigenous peoples is central to reconciliation. And in Port Moody, we have the beautiful Burrard Inlet. Visionary Coast Salish artist Tasha Faye Evans brought forward a project called In the Presence of Ancestors, and it features, over time, 5 house posts that will surround the Burrard Inlet just off of the Shoreline Trail. Tasha has been working in concert with other Coast Salish artists and the Port Moody Ecological Society. Can you highlight how the Department of Canadian Heritage is supporting Indigenous-led efforts to preserve and share languages, traditions, and cultural heritage across Canada?
Thank you for the question. There is many programs. I will start by the one that the minister refers. Since the adoption of the Indigenous Language Act, we have program. And under this program, we have really put back the onus to decide to the First Nation, the Inuit, and the Métis how they want that money to be spent. So it's really now at the stage of, you know better than us. So we work with committee, and they're the one who make recommendation to the program. And it's about preserving language. And it's amazing because some language were almost disappear, and some are coming back because of the effort that community are making to bring it back. But there is the cultural side, because as you say, these things are very interlinked. We see that separately, they see it completely interlinked. And on most of our program, I will say the one that the minister discussed, we have Indigenous community who apply, whether it's for the art, the music, the museum, all our program are totally open to support. And on the music, for example, there is even envelope that are specific for Indigenous creators. So the department has done a lot of work to make this program as accessible as possible and make sure that there were envelope also for artists and musicians and all the talent in the Indigenous community. I want to mention also repatriation. It's important for Indigenous community to bring back, or at least to decide what they want to do with objects that come from their community. And the museum program is also supporting some of those efforts. So I will say it's a multifaceted approach, and obviously we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm proud of the fact that we have developed quite a lot of a toolkit for Indigenous people.
I really appreciate that. You know, this project is very, very important to the community. There are 8 nations whose lands Port Moody is on. The Coquitlam, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Squamish, Katzie-Kwantlen, Kikate, and Stolo people. So and the inlet is of cultural significance. So it's very, very important that we work in partnership. My second question, I'm sure you're likely familiar with the iconic Science World in Vancouver, BC, beautiful British Columbia. It is the second most photographed building in North America, second only to the Statue of Liberty. Science World has been making a lot of impressive progress under the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings program. They had extensive roof repair. They actually had a leaking roof, that dome. So the roof repair, new HVAC, solar panels, and insulation upgrades, reducing energy use by over 40% and cutting greenhouse gas emissions by more than 66 tons annually. However, the revitalization project does not cover the extraordinary geodetic dome theater, which is their essential systems such as sound, projection, and seating, which will require an additional 10 to 12 million. So given the importance of Science World as both a cultural and educational hub, could you speak to possible funding streams that major heritage and cultural facilities like this can access the funding that they need to complete?
So there is 2 ways to do that. We have a program on infrastructure. The minister mentioned a bit about repair equipment, but it also can be used for construction. But it's a relatively small program for a whole country. So what we often do is we work with our colleague at infrastructure, and we try to make sure that infrastructure and cultural organization also apply in the big infrastructure or bigger infrastructure programs, so that they can have access to sometime a bit more money, as you mentioned, 10 million or more. And so it's a combination, I will say, of the Department of Canadian Heritage for the one that are maybe more mid-sized, and for the big one, it could be the infrastructure department.
Because this is really, am I still?
Sorry, Ms. Royer, you are out of time. And we are out of time for this committee. I really want to thank all the volume and the quality of our department witnesses today. We really appreciate your time and your insight. Monsieur Champoux, on n'a pas vraiment le temps.
Mr. Champoux, we don't really have time to discuss this, but I spoke to the clerks to try to reach the president of the CRTC once again to say that we really wanted to have her next week. Go ahead. Briefly, if possible, could we have an update as soon as our clerk has any news so that we know what to expect, because we do have to prepare. So for the benefit of everybody, so that we do the work that needs to be done, given it's a long weekend with the 2 days that we won't be sitting next week. Absolutely. We'll be in touch with you as soon as possible. Mr. Généreux? I'd like to point out to everybody that nobody ate this evening. We had our committee meeting from 4:30 to 6:30. I would propose that if nobody's going to eat when we're here till 6:30, that we should have maybe grapes and cheese and crackers, and not a complete supper prepared that nobody eats. Personally, I'm capable of waiting to have supper till after the committee meeting. I realize this as well, and I agree. Does everyone agree with this? Martin is going to go eat. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.